Now, first of all today, Labour say they will recruit 10,000 more police officers in England and Wales if they win the general election, and they'll pay for the policy by reversing cuts to capital gains tax. But there's some confusion about how much it will cost. In a radio interview earlier this morning, Shadow Home Secretary Diane Abbott said the sum was only £300,000, but that would only amount to £30 per police officer. She then corrected herself and said the figure was £80 million. But it seems that too was wrong. In a further clarification, Labour said it would in fact cost £300 million a year. It's embarrassing that you don't know your figures on a key policy.
I do know my figures, and as you will know, I did 7 interviews that morning, and that was the 7th, and I misspoke. But I do know my figures.
You didn't know them in that interview. Let's have a listen to it. In fact, it was with LBC and Nick Ferrari. Let's just take a listen and viewers can make up their own minds.
So how much would 10,000 police officers cost?
Well, if we recruit the 10,000 police men and women over a 4-year period, we believe it'll be about £300,000.
£300,000 for
Sorry,
10,000 police officers? What are you paying them?
No, I mean, sorry.
How much will they cost?
They will cost... It will cost about £80 million.
About £80 million?
Yeah.
How do you get to that figure?
We get to that figure because we anticipate recruiting 25,000 extra police officers a year at least over a period of 4 years. We will fund the 10,000 extra police officers by using some, not all, but just some of the over £2 billion.
The 80 million is the figure we use?
Yeah.
But if you, I don't understand. If you divide 80 million by 10,000, you get 8,000. Is that what you're going to pay these policemen and women?
No, we're talking about a process over 4 years.
I don't understand. What is he or she getting? 80 million divided by 10,000 equals 8,000. So what are these police officers going to be paid?
We will be paying them the average...
Has this been thought through?
Of course it's been thought through.
Where are the figures?
The figures are that the additional cost in year 1, when we anticipate recruiting about 250,000 policemen, will be 64.3 million.
250,000 policemen?
And women.
Right. So you're getting more than 10,000. You're recruiting 250,000.
No, we are recruiting 2,000 and perhaps 250. And the cost...
So where did 250,000 come from? I
think you said that, not me.
No, I can assure you said that figure because I wrote it down.
Diane Abbott, that is hugely embarrassing. It's not just misspeaking, to quote you a bit earlier. You just don't know your figures and you're not on top of your brief.
If I didn't know my figures, why was I able to do 6 other interviews and give the figures correctly? And you need to ask why the Conservative Party is so anxious to move the debate away from the 20,000 police officers.
We'll come on to that because we're going to speak to a Conservative in just a moment. But back to that interview. Never mind that you did 6 or 7 interviews. This is now an election campaign. Front benchers and government ministers are expected to do reams of interviews. This was a major policy announcement for you. By your own words, you want to make this a cornerstone of your manifesto. You didn't know the figures.
I did know my figures, and if you'd listened...
Why didn't you say them then?
Because I misspoke, as you heard. If I didn't know my figures, I wouldn't have been able to repeat them correctly in 6 other interviews.
Which interviews did you correct them? Because I listened to one of those interviews. You didn't mention the figures at all. You said it was all going to be costed and it would be in the manifesto.
I did 6 other interviews. The point is...
But you didn't mention the figures in those other interviews. You decided to talk about the figures, and they are basic figures. £300,000, which, as Nick Ferrari said, would have meant £30 per police officer. That's embarrassing. You were then struggling to correct that figure. Did you actually not know them at all and you were guessing when you were asked about it on air? or what is your explanation?
I knew the figures because I've repeated them many times
You
this morning.
haven't. I haven't heard you repeat them at all.
Well,
I've just heard them from that interview.
I can repeat them now. And I'm concerned that you don't want to talk about policing, which is something the public is concerned in, particularly the rise in violent crime. And you do want to go over and over. And at Ferrari...
But that's your fault, Diane Abbott. I mean, you want to talk about the issue, and we were all prepared to talk about the issue of policing and the claims that you are making that the police forces have been underfunded and you want to recruit more officers. But by going on air on a major interview where you just completely fluffed the figures, whether you knew them and you just chose not to say them or you couldn't remember them, actually doesn't do your cause any good. How do you think an interview like that... We couldn't find the figures in a press release, by the way, earlier, so I do dispute you claiming that you did know those figures. And if you didn't know those figures, how can you claim to want to be Home Secretary in charge of the police forces of England and Wales? Do you think you've instilled confidence in either the police forces or the voters?
People that listened to any of the interviews I gave this morning, with the exception of the LBC interview, will know that I do know the figures. And I wish you were prepared to talk about policing.
Yeah, and we are going to talk about policing, which is why we have Dominic Raab, a Conservative, on the programme. I'll talk to him about that. But people will be worried that you are not across what you should be in terms of this brief that you came on the airwaves to announce as a key part of your policy. I mean, do you think it's important to attach the right figures to major spending commitments in this election?
Of course I think that, and that's why I attached the right figures in 6 interviews out of 7. I also think it's important that a major programme like yours is prepared to talk to the Labour spokesperson about policing.
Yes.
Because people deserve to know what the Labour Party is saying.
All right, well, let's talk about how you're going to pay
issues.
for it, which is by reversing the cuts to capital gains tax. So what level of capital gains tax will it be under Labour?
We are going to reverse the cuts in capital gains tax in order to fund a number of
No,
things,
I understand that, but what level will it be?
Including the 10,000 police officers, but currently have some of the lowest rates of capital gains tax in Europe.
Right, but what are they? What will they be under Labour? If you win the election, what will you reverse the cuts to be? What will the 2 levels of capital gains tax be?
We will bring them back to where they were before. That's the point.
And what are those levels?
The point is that it will save us nearly £2.7 billion, and that's what we're going to use, both to pay for the 10,000 policemen and for other areas of our manifesto. And just in case you're saying that none of it's costed, we will produce a manifesto which is costed and is paid for. And we hope, as the campaign goes on, that people like yourself will be more willing to talk about the issues.
And
that
we really
concern the
will.
British
But I think
people.
what voters will want to know is that they can trust you with the figures and with the finances. And just one last time, because I fear you don't know what the levels of capital gains tax are now and what they would be if you did reverse them. Yes, it would raise £2.7 billion. That is the figure you put out. But what will the levels of capital gains tax be?
It's not the figure that we've put out.
No one out there trusts you on this issue because you can't get the basic facts right.
Well, as it so happens, there was a press release that was put out by Labour which did mention the £300 million figure as the cost. Diane didn't use it and didn't seem to know it in that interview.
I did use it in other interviews.
But you didn't use it in that interview. You must accept that does reduce your credibility. It allows your opponents to attack you in the way Dominic Raab is.
I think it reduces the media credibility because they're not prepared to talk about.
Well, you
the
can
issues
distract
people
by
want to
blaming the
talk
media,
about.
Diane Abbott, but it doesn't help your cause if you give ammunition to your opponents. What does it do to Labour campaigners out on the streets when they're having to do and fight fires, unnecessary fires, on a key bit of policy from Labour? Diane Abbott, thank you. Now,